Welcome, Mississippi State fans, on a happy homecoming evening. Speaking of which, if you can hear behind us, the bands are going, party's already cranking up, traffic still trying to get out, which is always a sign when you have a blowout game and traffic's this slow getting out. It means the fans stayed. They did their part. Dan Mullen asked specifically for fans to make an electric atmosphere. They did their part, and the Bulldogs certainly did their part today, Steve, with a 45-7 victory over the University of Kentucky.
David, we kind of talked in the pregame. We felt like this is a ball game Mississippi State should win. I don't think anybody expected a 45-7 type ball game. I think most people thought they would cover the spread. And there was a lot of this discussion all week. People were like, why is State favored by so many? And quite frankly, Mississippi State was the better football team. And they proved that tonight in every facet of the game. As Coach Mark Stoops said in postgame, Mississippi State was the more physical team. They were the better coach team. They were the more aggressive team. And I think it showed from start to finish. State comes out, gets behind that big offensive line with two freshman tackles, mind you, and just kind of went to business.
Yeah, and Coach Stoops talked about that the fact that State was able to get ahead, and Coach Mullen said the same thing. It allowed Mississippi State from then on, even when Kentucky tied the game up, to dictate tempo the whole evening there. And when you got Nick Fitzgerald running and throwing as well as he did, when you have Aris Williams running hard, offensive line playing great, and a defense that really teed off on Kentucky's quarterback Johnson, shut down the run game, State had the formula to really dominate a homecoming victory.
They did, and David, the coup de grace was Cam Dantzler coming free on a nickel blitz and forces an early throw from Steven Johnson. The ball's tipped. Gary Green brings it back to the house. At that point, the game had already been decided, but that was an exclamation point and a sign for Kentucky to get the starters out of the ball game before it really got out of hand. Yeah, David, Bulldogs, the most complete ball game of the year. We talked about how well they played against OSU, but they left some points on the floor.
Right.
And we really felt like tonight, short of one drop, Farrod Green trips down at the goal line and you kick a field goal there. That's really the only scoring opportunity Bulldogs didn't fully capitalize on. But this was as thorough a thrashing as we've seen of an SEC opponent in a long time.
Yeah, let's talk about those offensive plays. I thought, and I commented to you in first half and other people, that certainly the first half, and now I'll say for the entire game, I thought that was one of the better called games by Dan Mullen and his staff as far as the plays they designed, because two of the very best plays they called did not work because, as you said, tight end Farrod Green stumbled on what would have been a sure slam dunk touchdown. Another one, Nick Fitzgerald goes deep, and Gabe Miles he confuses which shoulder to go over. If he makes a turn quicker, it's a big catch. Those plays were so well done and run, it showed you that State had Kentucky's number, and when they had to, they just came back and pounded away. And I talked to Elton Jenkins but the most impressive play of the game to me, obviously, was Nick Fitzgerald's touchdown run before halftime, which really you could tell kind of took a lot of wind out of Kentucky's sails. They were as a sweep, 4th and 1. All of a sudden, like a Roadrunner cartoon, he just changes direction on his own. And Jenkins says he got back to the sideline and had to ask everybody what happened because nobody could tell. It shows when you have a quarterback like Nick Fitzgerald whose creativity can take advantage of opportunities but can also do called plays, you've got an offense that can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, David, and the post play to Reggie Ty that Fitzgerald had to rush a little bit, schemed them to death, got your guy in the matchup you wanted, just didn't have enough protection, there, and you end up getting a roughing the passer penalty, I believe, on that play. But you're right, David, some of the better called plays ended up being incompletions, right, being drops or something, and I really felt like State controlled the rhythm of the ball game, short of the one series where Nick Gibson was called for kind of a questionable holding call. It's kind of a takedown. I can see where the flag came out of the pocket.
Down pretty good.
Yeah.
I'll give him credit for that.
Outside of that, it never seemed like State was real herky-jerky on offense. Yeah. Even when it was only 7-0, you just kind of felt like State was one tackle or one play away from really blowing the lid off this thing. And then it's just like everything else. If you keep running that zone read and you're able to get gains on the outside, you get the dive on the inside going, and it's a matter of time before sooner or later somebody's going to break one, and that's exactly what happened.
Staying in the offensive field, we've talked about the offensive line playing well. Martinez Rankin did not take a snap, did not dress out for the game. He did get to serve captain duties in sweats. They're hoping to get him back by the Texas A&M game. Still a little iffy there, but when the line's able to 2 freshman tackles play this well against a veteran Kentucky defense, that's a good sign. You had receivers making plays without Keith Mixon, who in an emergency could have played today, did not have to. Gabe Miles gets back in the game. You're starting to see some guys making plays on that side of the ball, and again, the offensive line really, to me, kind of set the tone. But it all comes back to just having a guy like Nick Fitzgerald who can do so much. And then when he has to come out of the game, Keaton Thompson walks in there and scores a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah, Keaton was outstanding today. And I think games like this are when Bulldog fans can really get excited about their future. You've got a pretty good present going, but you begin to think about Keaton Thompson and the way that he runs his own read and that long touchdown run that he had. as soon as he pulled it, there was nobody there. It was absolutely the right decision, and that's one of the things you think at passing-wise, he's still got some mechanical things to work on. His passing numbers this year not great. Granted, he's not playing with the first unit a lot of times, but it just says a lot about this offense and a lot about Dan Mullen and this coaching staff that they've been able to get Keaton in the ball game some and give him some quality snaps. And today, when Fitzgerald's helmet came off a couple times, Thompson never slowed down, came in and got positive yards every time.
Also, Mississippi State's offense was 4 of 4 on fourth down plays today, and you can't ask for any better than that, quite obviously. Turning the defensive side of the ball, Mississippi State holds Kentucky to 260 yards on 59 plays, and they hold them to 1 touchdown, except for a couple of breakdowns. When Stephen Johnson, let's give the guy credit. He's a senior. He's smart. He took advantage of a couple of run opportunities, one which turned into a kind of fluky touchdown. At first, we thought he'd thrown the ball forward. As it was, he was just reaching for the pylon. Ball comes loose. Legitimate touchdown. Other than that, Kentucky truly did not threaten a whole lot, and that's saying something because Benny Snell is a good running back. Stephen Johnson is a good creative quarterback, and they've got some decent receivers. State's defense, we talk about the sacks and the hurries. I thought a lot of it was just playing coverage. I thought State's secondary played the best coverage they have in an SEC game all season.
I don't think there's any question about that. And, David, nobody really throws at the Bulldog corners. And tonight they tried a little bit, and State was able to make the play. So maybe this defense is beginning to grow up. This is also an offense, too, where I think people expected Stephen Johnson to take some shots down the field. You knew they were coming. When they did come, they were momentum builders for State and momentum killers for Kentucky because they were never really able to complete that home run ball. And you're right, David, a couple of times State loses outside containment. Johnson makes them pay with some nifty runs. But you're not going to win like that. At some point, you've got to be able to run some offense that's not so herky-jerky as Dan Mullen says.
Picking a couple of defensive guys that really stood up. Let's start out with Jeffrey Simmons. I thought he just completely dominated the line of scrimmage almost by himself at times. It won't show on the stat sheet, but he set that tone up front. You have the linebackers. Des Harris played solid. Gary Green, besides his big pick six, obviously, he played a great game. Leo Lewis, I thought, made some outstanding tackles there in support. But to me, the defensive player of the game was Mark McLaurin, particularly in the first half when it was still a competitive game. He made some stops, some coverages that shows that when the guy makes the right decisions, and all safeties considered, between stay, go, cover, support, all that, these guys can be really good.
There's no doubt about it, David. And Mark McLaurin's a guy that's been around a little while. He's got a couple of years under his belt, and when they've had those busts, it hadn't always been him, but sometimes it has, and it's a point of pride for him. Another guy that probably an honorable mention, Montez Sweat, I thought he had one of his better games as a Bulldog, really impacted the game. And as you mentioned, not all of it's going to show up in the box score. He does get a few tackles for loss, but he was in the backfield almost every passing play, collapsing the pocket, and forcing some trepidation on the Kentucky quarterbacks.
As we were a little worried in pregame, special teams might be a factor with this crazy wind, which is still whipping around, as you can tell right now. But Jace Crispin walks in, knocks through a routine field goal. The only time he's really tested, Logan Cook. What more can we say about Logan Cook? He did his job. I mean, his average today, 7.5 yards. Totally misleading. He put the ball up there and let his coverage take care of it, and he dropped one ball inside the 10-yard line that was just killed perfectly. State's punting support was there. This was a game where, as you say, State played about as well-rounded a game as it has in SEC season. Probably, to me, a lot better even than the LSU whipping.
I don't think there's any question, David. And this is a ball game the Bulldogs needed and the Bulldog fans needed. There were a lot of people that were worried about this ball game. I was never truly worried about it unless State gave them the football. I really felt like if State won the turnover battle, then they would win the ball game because I just simply felt like State was the better team. Last year was a fluke. I still believe that. That being said, it still counts. This ball game tonight showed the difference in the programs. It's 8 of 9 in the series, and I think outside of the Tennessee-Alabama series, as far as cross-divisional opponents, this is about as lopsided a series as there is in this league.
And there's another year we sit there and say, why couldn't we be in the Eastern Division? Yes,
sure.
Georgia's very good this year, but you look at it and think this Bulldog team could walk through the rest of the East at this point. But we're stuck in the SEC West. Next week we're back into conference action on that side of the ball with going to Texas A&M. But you're going with a lot more confidence now because you can not only run the ball, you can make plays in the passing game. You can freelance. You can be creative there. You just feel like they've got a good boost of confidence because they thoroughly took care of a Brigham Young team they were supposed to, and they thoroughly crushed a Kentucky team that historically has given them a lot of fits. You've got to think the Bulldogs are feeling good, and they're starting to get healthy again.
That's true, David, and and they're going to need it. I mean, Texas A&M probably a better team than many people anticipated this year. I mean, they're on the verge of having a really big year. They know what's at stake, and State's not going to sneak up on them. State won the ball game last year, 5-2 this year, possibly ranked this week. We'll see what happens because a lot of people, Kentucky was the last team out of the rankings, and then State beats them. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, David, a big test next week. Bulldogs will enjoy this homecoming queen. I'm sure Victoria Vivians will dance the night away. And then the Bulldogs, let's remind, men's basketball in action tomorrow, free at the Humphrey Coliseum against Nebraska. Bring a donation for the victims of Hurricane Irma.
So Mississippi State, 45-7 victors over Kentucky, now 2-2 in SEC play, getting ready to go back into league action. Our story's already being filed. Mike Nemeth has his flash gamer up. I'm working on a gamer built around the fact that Mississippi State's first play was called on Wednesday by Nick Fitzgerald, and it worked. They told him it didn't work. They didn't say exactly what happened, but they knew it wouldn't be happy. State wanted to run the ball so hard they came out throwing it. Have fun reading the story. Steve has a lot of videos to put up there. Paul Jones working on a notebook right now. Robbie Falk is writing a story about State's defensive efforts today. So we'll have thorough coverage on that, a lot of videos, and we'll even have some material going into tomorrow's game as well. And obviously I'll be out here at Humphrey Coliseum 1 o'clock tomorrow. I don't know what Steve's plans are. Tell me, homecoming's going on behind us. What was the favorite frat party you usually tried to crash at homecomings?
You know, I really enjoyed the Sigma Chi's, you know, and listen, I was not a Greek guy. I had a lot of friends in different fraternities, you know, back in Southern Miss, the Downtown Daddies, or the Delta Tau Deltas, they called them. I always had a lot of fun when we were on campus here. Everybody was always open. A few Chi Omegas of the world out there on the sorority side, you know, probably a few favorites there. But, yeah, David, it's a good time to be in Starkville, and may the students of Mississippi State have a great time tonight.
And everybody be safe out there as well, and make plans to be at the Hump tomorrow, then start looking ahead. And those of you who can join us, I urge you, you need once in your sports life to see a game at Texas A&M. You need to see the parade of the Corps of Cadets. It's awesome in pregame. You need to see what a $450 million stadium expansion looks like. You just need to get out there, and you need to cheer on a Bulldog team. Let's face it, next week is the kind of game that, if the Bulldogs can pull it off, could really put them in great bowl picture situation with the scores happening right now around the rest of the SEC. So we'll follow that up tomorrow as well. So for Mike Nemeth, for Gene Swindoll, for Paul Jones, for Robbie Falk, Steve Robertson here. This is David Murray from genespage.com. Bulldogs win 45-7. Now 5-2 on the season, 2-2 SEC.